Thank you, Rabbi Hajioff, for your words of inspiration, and Rabbi Mizrahi. Today's one of those days where things that can go wrong will go wrong. I had a backpack that I left on this little area over here. I was helping set up computers and the screens, and had my notes in there, prepared today to share something remarkable, hopefully something inspirational. And if you saw me, like being a little creepy, walking around the room and like looking into the different benches, it's because I couldn't find my bag. And I'm like, all right, whatever it is. It's like I have a half hour left to prepare before this class starts. I got to figure out something new. So I quickly got on my phone and I typed out a new class. And I found some of the source that I remembered that I was going to be speaking about today. And hopefully I'll have it prepared. And as we're getting closer, I just found out that accidentally someone took my bag to Brooklyn. But at least my bag is safe. and hopefully we'll see what happens over here. So I have a question for you. Like, what are we really doing here today? We've spent, since Motzei Shabbat preparing for this. We're in this mode of sadness, and we're not eating. We're fasting. We're sitting on the floor. We're sitting on benches now. We're getting up. We're not wearing leather shoes. We got these little cute little shoes on with these rubber shoes or whatever kind of shoes you're wearing. Like, what are we doing this for? And I'm asking the question because it's a question that Jews asked once before. You see, we're remembering and mourning the loss of the Second Temple. But we know that both temples were destroyed on this day, that this is a day of tragedy, a day of suffering for our people, a day of humiliation for our people as well. But what happened after the destruction of the First Temple? Jews, we know, were left in exile for only 70 years. They had come back to Jerusalem and they had rebuilt the temple. And the question the Gemara asks is, well, what was happening during the Second Temple era? Were they sitting down on Tish'a BeAb and mourning? We know from the Pesukim in the Torah itself that this day was going to be a day of tears, a day of sadness for us because we shed false tears when the Meraglim came back on Tish'a BeAb and gave us a false report of the land of Israel. So we knew this day we marred in sadness. We knew that we would be going through pain. The Jewish people understood the temple was destroyed. And the story of Purim tells us of where our ancestors were at that time in history. We know where they were at. We know that they went to Achashverosh's party. We know what they experienced. There's actually a very interesting Meiri, which says that there was this, that Xerxes, or Achashverosh, some people say that was him, he actually came down and brought Pluto to Jerusalem. And he wanted Pluto to see what had been happened to the temple, the Jewish temple of Jerusalem. And as Pluto is surveying the scene, he sees an old man crying over the stones of Jerusalem. And he sees Yirmiyahu crying. And Plato says to him, to Yirmiyahu, what are you crying about? It's just a stone. It's just a rock, a piece of stone on fire, earth in the ground. What's your problem? You're an intelligent man. You're supposed to be a prophet of God, a wise man. You have all this wisdom inside of you. What are you crying about? Gashmi things, physical things. So Yirmiyahu looks at Plato and says to him, you don't understand. And it's going to be very difficult for me to explain this to you, but I'll try. He says, do you have any questions that you've ever struggled with? And Plato says, yes, I have lots of questions. He says, ask me all of your questions. Unfortunately, the Meiri doesn't tell me what the questions are. He just leaves me with the story. And he says that every question that Plato asked of Yirmiyahu, he answers it. Every question he had an answer for. Can you imagine going to someone, meeting someone, and any question you have, any question, and there's an amazing, satisfying answer to the question? No doubt. Clarity. So Plato's like, I don't understand. He's like, are you an angel or are you a man? Like, where did you come from? He's like, now you're beginning to understand. He says, the answers to all the questions, the wisdom that I possess comes from this place of stone and ash. And that's what I'm mourning. And I can't even begin to explain to you what it means to be mourning this place, because you have no concept in your own mind of what it means to have lost something so amazing and so truly remarkable. So when the Jews came back and rebuilt the Beit HaMikdash, were they sitting down on Tish'a BeAb and mourning the loss of the Beit HaMikdash? Or was it a moed? Like we know, the Gemara tells us that Tish'a BeAb is going to be turned into a holiday, a day where we're going to celebrate, a day where we're going to lose the sadness, a day where we're going to come together and celebrate the reunification of our people. Did that happen when they rebuilt the temple? So the Gemara asked the question, and it goes through different scenarios, and it seems like it's a machloket, but Rabbi Hananel tells us that he believed that during the second temple, that there was no fasting that was observed during Tish'a BeAb, because we had the temple, it was complete, and therefore there was no need for any kind of fasting. And that's one opinion. And then you have Harambam. And the Rambam is using the Lashon of the Gemara, right? And he says that since hichpelu bo tzarot, since the pain became more intensified in later generations, right? And therefore they fasted. The Jews fasted because of this tremendous amount of suffering that was going to befall the people, and therefore, from the Maimonides' position, the Jews were fasting during in the middle of the Second Temple era. Now, this is fascinating. Remember, Maimonides was a Rishon, right? He lived around the 12th, 13th century. The rabbis, the Achronim, lived after 15th, 16th, until today, centuries. Okay? And they're saying, I don't understand, how could Maimonides make that point and say that the Jewish people were fasting and sitting on the floor and mourning the temple during the Second Temple era? Because this idea, that the suffering was more intense, only was an expression of the intensification that came after the destruction of the Second Temple. So how could you use the Talmud's logic for a time that did not happen yet? It makes no sense. And the truth is that those tragedies happened later, and Maimonides is clearly speaking about something uniquely different, because there's another theme to this day that we have a hard time connecting to. I'm going to try to explore that with you. Rav Yosef Ber Soloveitchik held that during this period of Tish'a BeAb, that it wasn't a day of just mourning. That if you were a Jew living in the middle of the Second Temple era, that was not a day of mourning, but it was a day of something completely different. It was a day of tefillah, a day of prayer. A prayer for what? Now, if you're an immigrant, or your parents are immigrants, you probably have some different rituals than some of your American counterparts. I'll give you a small example. I grew up in Brooklyn. My parents are immigrants. And my wife, she's from Cleveland, Ohio. So if you grew up in Brooklyn, New York, you know that when you walk away from your car, the first thing you check twice is, did I lock the doors? Right? You always lock the doors. You don't leave the doors open. Anywhere. In your house, everything is locked. Everything is always locked. Right? Double bolted. Whatever, any bolts you got to lock everything. Okay? My wife grew up in Cleveland, where the greatest crimes that happened were natural, like a tornado struck, or there was a hailstorm. They weren't really concerned about people, per se. And she always forgets to lock the doors, because she didn't grow up in a place where she had to ever worry about locking doors. People don't lock their doors in Cleveland. So stop taking our cars from Brooklyn, go to Cleveland, whoever's watching, and take their cars. Our cars are going to be locked, okay? So you have the doors where they are open, and she always leaves the door open, and of course, I always find things missing from my car. So there was one event, I'll never forget this. This was about 11, 12 years ago. It was Erev Shabbat, and I'm getting ready for Shabbat. I'm washing my kids in the bathtub, trying to clean everybody, getting ready for Shabbat. And my wife calls me, she says, Reuven, quickly. I'm like, what? I look outside of my window, I have a bay window, and I'm looking at this on Avenue P and East 31st Street, and she's like, look, there's some guy in your car. I'm like, well, how did he get into my car? Okay, fine, I had to go down there and confront this guy, this big hooded figure, and put my stuff down right now. Thank God nothing happened. But your experience defines a little bit of how you react to the environment that you find yourselves in right now. And when Jews had come back after the destruction of the first temple, do you know what they were thinking and feeling? Is it going to happen again? Are we going to rebuild this place and watch armies come down and descend? Are we going to see our children and wives being dragged out and sold into slavery? Are we going to have to endure the pain of watching something that we put so much effort into be set ablaze again? They were terrified it was going to happen again. And therefore, Rav Soloveitchik says that, and it's interesting because he's saying this post-Holocaust, right? And if you've met Holocaust survivors, they've never felt too comfortable being in America. They never felt too comfortable with how Americans felt comfortable with their external expressions of their Judaism. Oh, you're going to go to a game? You're going to play a game? You're not going to wear a kippah, are you? You don't want to wear a kippah when you're going into the game. Today it's different because we're so comfortable. We're not afraid anymore. But if you know what I'm talking about, if those of you that have grandparents who came here from the old world, they weren't too excited about external expressions of your Judaism. Keep it quiet. You're going to wear a Star of David? Tuck it under. Tuck it in. Take it off. Don't wear it. Right? Just a different mentality. So they were praying for the fear of the Second Temple being erased. And this is what the Rambam is saying, that when you go through this powerful experience of loss, how could you ever be comfortable? How could you ever become complacent? How could you ever allow yourself to get to a place where there's that fear lurking in the background, that it may just pop up somewhere, somehow? So Tish'a BeAb during the Second Temple era, when you were going to a time machine, we'd come on this day, you'd see people sitting on the floor, crying and praying, so that this moment doesn't happen again. Rav Moshe Weinberger was one of my rabbis in Five Towns. He tells a story of his father, who was a Holocaust survivor. This was about 25 years ago when they were just building the synagogue, the Eish Kodesh, and he decided he wanted to take his parents, two Holocaust survivors, to see this beautiful synagogue that he was building. And he takes them in and he gives them the tour, and he sees his father's face, and he's not excited. He's almost disappointed. And he says, "Dad, is everything okay?" He's like, "Yeah." He says, "I don't understand." He's like, "Look, what are you going to do with the windows?" He's like, "What do you mean with the windows?" He's like, "We're going to have windows. Don't worry about it. Like, the windows are just being built. This is the frame. They're going to put the windows in." He's like, "But don't you see the windows are too close to Woodmere Boulevard? They're going to be broken. Are you going to put like fencing in front of it? Are you going to put nets in front of it? How do you have a synagogue being built in such a careless way? What's wrong? What are you thinking?" Meaning, of course it's going to be destroyed. That was his reality. He saw it happen. How could you be so careless? How could you build a building like this? Where are the fences? Where's the moat around the Beit Knesset? And we take it for granted. We're safe. It's okay. We're good. Our brothers in Israel are sitting there. 600 rockets fell in 3 days. It's crazy. It's not normal. We become complacent a little bit. The Gemara in Gittin tells us horrible stories of people who went through the suffering of Tish'a BeAb, watching the destruction. And there's one particular story that always stood out for me. It's the story of a girl named Martha. She grew up very, very wealthy, and her father was very wealthy. He was a fabric dealer, and her whole life she always walked on silk. She never touched the ground. It's a famous story. And Gemara says that as they got closer to Tish'a BeAb and the fighting and the war became more and more intense, there was a lack of food. There was starvation that broke out in Jerusalem. That people were horrible things, eating children to keep their stomach from just like feeling that horrible pain of hunger, the hunger pains. It says this one girl looked out, she wanted to get food, she wanted anything, just give me something I put in my mouth. It's a horrible feeling not to have food in you for so long. It's terribly painful. And she walks out, and the Gemara says simply, she doesn't see what she was stepping on. She steps on a piece of dung, sees it, and drops dead from that experience. And it's like a weird Gemara to talk about, like she's stepping on feces. Okay, I can't say the S word. Okay, she's stepping on dung. Okay, and she dies from that. Right. So, what is the Gemara trying to teach me about that? Why is the Gemara telling me that story? It's such a random, weird thing to put in the Gemara. What are you trying to explain? But I think the Gemara is making this point that when we live in absolute wealth and comfort, right, we're weakening ourselves. we're becoming weaker. We're not ready for what the world has to offer. We're not ready for the challenges that are going to come our way. We're not ready to get dirty. We're not ready to go out and fight for our survival. And you give up to the point where something so tiny as a little bit of something that smells so, inappropriate at that time, she drops dead from it. I would much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. I'd much rather be someone who is prepared every single moment of life to deal with the challenges that we may face versus being some guy who's sitting there just not worrying about anything, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take care of my plant and not worry about anything. We're not ready for war. We're not ready to deal with life's challenges. We had it easy. We're not even locking our doors anymore. Okay, insurance, we'll get a new car. What's the big deal? It's not so bad. I want a new one anyway, right? We rationalize all kinds of things. But are we willing to fight? Are we able to? Are you ready to defend your beliefs? Are you ready to stand up when people come for you and your families or communities? What are you ready to do? Is there a plan in place? Tish'a BeAb was that day. It was the plan that we said, what are we going to do in the worst case scenario? We don't want to have the worst. We're going to pray that it doesn't happen. But at the very least, we're going to be prepared. In the second temple, they sat down and they mourned Tish'a BeAb. Do you understand that? They were crying for the loss of the temple because it could happen again. Tish'a BeAb is not just about mourning the loss of the temples. It's a day where we mourn the loss of our inner reality. The inability to recognize that every moment of life is meaningfully and is powerfully profound. That there is a Borei Olam, that there is a God that is in love with you. That the challenge that you face right now are not accidental, that they're there for a reason. That you were meant to do something much more beautiful, that much more than you could possibly imagine. But this Hester Panim, God has concealed himself in this galut. He has removed himself from the reality that we're in right now. And it's not clear. In the Beit HaMikdash, what Yirmiyahu was trying to teach Plato was that there was a moment in time where everything made sense. And it was gone. It was lost. There's a famous story of the Beit HaLevi, who was approached by a bunch of Jews from Brisk. They wanted to get him. They needed a new rabbi in town, and the Beit HaLevi was the biggest Talmid Chacham around. This is Rav Soloveitchik Senior, and they wanted him for the job. So the Chafetz Chaim tells the story, and he was in the room when they came to approach the Beit HaLevi, and he says to them, he was a student. So they said to the Beit HaLevi, we'll give you money. Don't worry about it. We'll give you a crazy salary, amazing salary. We're going to give you so much money that your wife won't have to sell milk. All too often, the rabbis, even if they're getting a salary, it's still not enough. They have their wives supplementing it with all kinds of things. He's like, your wife won't have to sell the milk. Don't worry about it. You're going to make enough money. He's like, I'm not interested. Go home. They send back another group of guys. We'll give you more money. We're going to double the salary. No, sorry. I'm not interested in the position. I'm happy where I am. I like my yeshiva. I like my boys. I like what I'm doing here. I'm not doing it. So they're going back and forth, and these Briskers are, it was an amazing city of super intelligent, working class people, were very rigid, very methodical, but they weren't ready to give up. So they sent someone back, one last chance. And this boy comes up to the Beit HaLevi and says, listen, Rabbi, I know you said no, but do you know there are 25,000 Jews waiting for you in Brisk? There are 25,000 Jews waiting to learn from you. There are 25,000 Jews that need your guidance, want your direction. The Beit HaLevi hears this. Chafetz Chaim says, he started crying. He calls his wife, he's like, pack your bags, we're leaving. We're leaving. We're getting up and we're going. He says, how can I leave 25,000 Jews behind? How could I not get up and feel a sense of responsibility? He packs his bags and he leaves. And the Chafetz Chaim, when he tells the story, He says, can you imagine how hard it is for Mashiach not to want to come? But what was he motivated by? He's motivated by the fact that he felt a sense of responsibility for the people around him. It wasn't about his comforts. It wasn't about the money. That wasn't going to go ahead and change his opinion, his mind about what he should be doing. But when we have the opportunity of impacting so many, how could you not get up and do something? 2022, we're doing pretty good. Lots of yeshivot, you got schools, you got institutions, you got beautiful synagogues, you have educated rabbis, you have people who have the ability of expressing Judaism in a way that's meaningful. I did not grow up like that, did not have rabbis like that when I was a kid. No one could go ahead and get up and say anything that I could relate to at all. And now we live in a world where you have all these amazing young people who could express Judaism in a way that's palpable, that's palatable, that's digestible, something that we could go ahead and internalize. That's amazing, right? So amazing. So much infrastructure. You have Torah anytime, you have Meaningful Minute, Instagram Lives. Wherever you are, you have the opportunity of being connected. Powerful, right? But there's probably about maybe, I'd say 30, 40,000 Jews on these platforms. Maybe 100,000 at most. But there are about 5 million Jews living in America, most of which don't even know what Tish'a BeAb is about. Most Jews in this country are not fasting today. Most Jews in this country don't even understand what the first or the second temple was. No relationship to it. But we're okay. You live in one of the most densely populated area of Jews. Tri-state area has about close to 2 million Jews. A lot, right? But we walk by people, we see people, we're not moved by any of those experiences. We don't feel a sense of responsibility. Like Rabbi Mizrahi was saying earlier, we're just so enamored by ourselves that it's only about my comfort. It's only about my experience. And this is one of the other things that our ancestors were mourning, right? What happens to a generation of people that are only thinking about themselves and no one else? There's no future. No future. You want to understand why so much of the world today is unraveling in the way that it is? It's because of mindfulness meditation. That's the problem today. When all you are doing is being mindful of your own breath, of your own heartbeat, of your own environment, right? You're only thinking about yourself again. It's about me, how I want to be called, my pronouns, my expression, my gender, my choice, my body. But we don't think ever about anything about the world around us. It's only about what I can take from the world around, as opposed to what I can provide and give to the world around us. Tish'a BeAb asks that question. What are you going to do to be able to move yourself into a place where you could get up and feel a sense of connection? The Chachamim tell us that there are 4 elements that define our nature. And that each of these 4 elements, fire, water, earth, and air, are expressed in everything that we do. And they tell us that when we look specifically at the elements of earth and fire, that those are feminine traits, and that wind and water are masculine traits. And that we know that the temple itself was destroyed with fire, and the fire itself destroyed something that came from the earth. And therefore there's a deep connection, correlation between these 2 concepts that require a type of tikkun, or require a type of rectification. The Chachamim tell us that you could see how sadness expresses itself through all 4 elements. Water expresses itself in sadness when someone lives his whole life looking for pleasure and recognizing that there's never enough for him. That wind comes from someone's haughtiness and thinking that he could be something much more, and then dealing with the fact that he's not that. There's the fire, the passion that leads to anger, and that always leads you into sadness, always regret. And earth is the laziness, the feeling stuck, lethargic, unwilling, unable to get up and go and do. I can't do it, I'm too tired, maybe tomorrow. But fire and earth have other powers in them. Fire has the power of passion, to inspire, to reawaken, to renew. Fire gives us the ability to explore. Fire gives us clarity. And that's that particular midah, that measure of character that we're supposed to be using in the world as a tikkun for the loss of the temple. It was burnt, it was destroyed by fire. It didn't have to. An earthquake could have come and just sucked the whole thing into the earth. That's not what happens. Specifically, fire comes down and it burns the temple. Earth and fire are the two traits that we need to be engaging in the most. Earth is our comforts. It's the thing that prevents me from getting up and going out and doing more. I'm too comfortable, Rabbi. I'm comfortable where I am. I don't want to try too hard. I don't want to ruin my nail. I don't want to break my this. I want to be where I am. It's too hot outside. I don't want to come. This room, first of all, I just want to give all of you a round of applause for being here because today it's so much more convenient to sit in your home, like most of you guys who are watching this right now, and in the comforts of your bed with the air conditioning on, wherever you are. And you have people who came out, and they got on a train or a car, they walked in the heat, and they're here in the building. And it makes such a powerful difference. To be present means that you care a little bit more. To be present means that you are willing and ready and able to receive a deep message, that you're not just hearing information, but you want something much more profound. You want to connect on the deepest level. That's what it means to show up. To hear things online is nice if you're just looking for information. That's never going to enter in your heart and soul. But to be present in the room, Chachamim tell us that the merit that we get for listening to a class is called schar halicha. It's the power of putting in the effort of showing up. Because we know that 90% of success is just showing up. I'm not in control of the outcome. I'm pretty confident that most of you won't remember most of what was said tonight. But that's not your responsibility. That's a gift from God if you can remember all those things. You know what your responsibility is? Show up. Be here. Be part of the kihila. You want to rebuild the temple? I want to rebuild the temple. I've dedicated my life to it. I've dedicated my life to be someone who is interested in educating, inspiring. My home is open to all kinds of people. My life is dedicated to spending time with people, taking them on journeys, on experiences that help them open them up to the potential of their own faith and their heritage. It's important. I didn't have that. I grew up in a community that was super rich with Judaism, and that people would walk by me having no clue that I was a Jew. No one ever invited me for a Shabbat ever into their house growing up. That wasn't a thing back then. Why would you want someone like that in your home? It would taint your children. But when we create a Judaism that has those boundaries that prevent us from seeing the depth and the beauty of the people around us, that's not Judaism anymore. That's something else. And I believe this is what was experienced. This is exactly what our ancestors experienced before that temple was destroyed. A world of myopic Judaism, where we have something called sinat chinam, a baseless hatred that permeated the world around us. How does that happen? How do we get ourselves into a place where I just don't really care what you have to say anymore? How do we get to a place where we can become so apathetic and so dead on the inside that I'm not moved to action? I'm not motivated anymore. It comes from several things. One, it comes from laziness. It comes from a laziness of thinking. I don't want to push. I don't want to try too hard to explain and understand. I'm just comfortable where I am. Don't bother me. That's where it comes from a little bit. That truth requires a tremendous amount of effort on our parts. That if you want to go ahead and uncover the mysteries of life, of your mission, then you have to be willing to fight for those answers. That there is no scenario where you could just give in. That doesn't exist. En lo yochol, rak lo rotzeh. Those Jews who are fighting on the front lines in Israel right now, do you think they could just give up and walk away and turn around? They have no choice. Are you willing and ready and able to get up and fight for what we need to do as Jews? You know where the battle begins, my friends? It begins inside of you. It's an internal battle. The battle is within yourselves. You want to find God. You want the gilui. You want the revelation of the Almighty. You have to go through galut. It's there. They're related. We have to go through the galut. We're in the galut right now. But what are we doing with it? Is it just a day of sitting and mourning? Or is it a day of tefillah? a day of introspection, a day of clarification, a day of willing and readiness to get up to go to war. I believe that's what today is. You want to understand why we're still locked out of Jerusalem, why we're still fighting the same war? I mean, it's crazy. You're going to go on to CNN tonight and say, the Jews, again, the Israelis are abusing their power, right? They're the Goliath and the Palestinians are the David, a complete perversion of the story. What would happen if the Israelis put down their weapons? What would happen to Jerusalem if we told the army to pull out? You know what would happen. I don't have to tell you what's going to happen. We are not finished yet. We're still in Galut. We have the land of Israel. We have to cherish it, visit it, support it, be there. But it's not enough to just standing there on the sidelines and say, I'll make a nice donation. Thank you so much. Good luck, Israel. We love you. Hatzlacha. High five from America. We are going to need to be more vocal about what we believe in. And I don't recommend anyone here being vocal unless you have spent the time clarifying the arguments. Until you know how to be vocal, until you know how to express yourselves, don't do it. But that doesn't mean that you don't have responsibility to get up and do something about it right now. Tish'a BeAb is about clarification. Who do you want to be? What kind of a generation do you want to be remembered for? Do you want this to be? You want to be remembered as, we remember the 2020s. That's the generation, the lazy generation. Too lazy to spend time to clarify their questions. Too lazy to get up and do anything. It was all about their comforts. Yesterday's luxuries are today's necessities. It's true. That's true. But I'm not going to be defined by those things. I want something more. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to show up. I'm going to try my best to make a difference. I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to read. I'm going to drive the rabbi crazy until I understand it, because I want to be the one that feels a sense of responsibility. When we give up inside, we become dead. You become part of what I call the zombie apocalypse, the walking dead. Tish'a BeAb is about waking your inner souls. You have so much more to give. You have so much more love to give to the world around you. You have to believe in yourselves. Don't allow the broken past define our future. Feel a sense of empoweredness, that with all the baracha and the shefa that you have, that's there for one reason and one reason alone. To use it to bring tov into the world. When the Jews came up, they said, Kacha amar Hashem, Tzom HaChamishi yeh lebeit Yehuda l'sason l'simcha. The Jews came up and Zechariah told them that at some day this fast, the 5th month of Av, this is the month that we're in right now, the 5th month of the Jewish calendar, is going to be turned from a day of sadness into a day of sason and simcha. A day of clarity, a day where simcha isn't just the sitting there and laughing and feeling happiness. Simcha, my friends, is the knowledge of knowing that I am doing everything that I'm meant to be doing. That's the clarity we're asking for on Tish'a BeAb. May we all be blessed with that clarity, the recognition that you are an infinite source of power and potential, that you have the ability of breaking down all the walls, and you should not allow the past to define your future. And more importantly, that every ounce of effort that you put into just showing up even, and to clarifying, allows us to get one step closer to singing and dancing together in Yerushalayim without the fear of anyone around us, but with that closeness with Borei Olam. Thank you so much.